to kick off this exploration of pilgrimage, this is a quote from the very beginning of a book I read years ago, but just it came to mind. It's called "The Road to Emmaus: A Pilgrimage as a Way of Life." I will. Where's the camera? There it is. By Jon Frost. I'll have it here, and if you need the title later, just let me know. This is at the very beginning of this book, and it's this. It's from Thomas Merton. The geographical pilgrimage is the symbolic acting out of an inner journey.
We have taken the road to Emmaus. The real one.
Of the meanings and signs of the outer journey. One can have one without the other. It is better to have both. Could we just ask if you're on Zoom to please mute for the moment, unless we're having a discussion? That would be great. Thank you. We begin here, and I love this quote because I think as we go through it, it has both of these components of an inner journey and an outer journey. Because we might take pilgrimages of a certain sort, a week here or there, or just a destination. We think about that geographical journey. But what I think this quote invites us to, and what I think really the life of faith invites us to, is a way of being in the world that is like a pilgrim, a way of being in the world where we're on a pilgrimage as a way of life. Now, that might not be a word, a pilgrim might not be a word we use a whole lot, other than maybe in November, and we are talking about, kind of origin stories of our country. But, and it reminds, one of the ways for years when we would be doing mission trips and preparation for that, one of the ways we would talk about this idea, because pilgrimage is a big theme in how we talk about mission and mission trips, and how we go to a place in a way that's very intentionally not like a tourist, right? So I just put up here, I don't know what that means, but I still see them, I still see that, and we're gonna just press on. So what lies ahead, forgetting what lies behind.
That'll preach.
It will. So let me throw it out to you all. I have a few thoughts, but just what comes to mind? Either word, what does it mean to be a pilgrim versus what does it mean to be a tourist? What words come to mind with both of these? We can toss this around for a little bit. And if I am ignoring a hand on Zoom, please let me know.
I think contemplation versus just viewing.
Yeah. So contemplation for like being a pilgrim versus just viewing as a tourist. Yeah, Rick, did you have a hand?
Well, I was going to say a pilgrim is on some type of mission to achieve something, whereas a tourist is basically there to observe and take in, not so much on a journey of spiritual journey.
Right. So there's maybe more of a sense of a journey to be taken with being a pilgrim, as opposed to like viewing, taking in. You said I think of the word consume as a tourist, right? Like you want to go and like consume as much as you can, whether it's experiences or cuisine or the sights.
I'm sorry. I think of pilgrim as an individual choice to do this, or tourist is often a group or at least two people together.
So there might be more, like a personal, more of a personal investment and choice in embarking on some kind of a pilgrimage. One of the things sorry. Go ahead, man.
But you're coming with a built-in sense of respect and value for the place that you're going, rather than a casual.
A built-in, so one of the ways, and I think this plays out in a lot of different ways. I think of shallow versus a deep presence in a place. If as a pilgrim you're more invested, perhaps in respecting and understanding the place you're going. And this is not to say, like, we're all going to be tourists probably at some point in our life, and this is not to like make an either or binary, but a shallow presence, meaning like, I really want to just relax and like kick my feet up in a pool. I don't need to learn the language. Like I want to eat a burger, like I don't want to eat, So, and then another thing that came to my mind is pilgrims, I think, are open to surprise, open to the unexpected. As a tourist, I feel like we do everything we can to not experience the unexpected. We got our plans and our itineraries, and woe to the person who makes me or our group late for an excursion because we are not open to that. Yeah. Any other thoughts about pilgrim versus tourist? Sounds like a heavyweight bout. Yes. There we go.
Consuming and absorbing.
Yeah, consuming versus absorbing. Yeah, and maybe there's more reciprocity too. Like you're not just you're taking in so that you can also give back and bless. Yeah, so we could, yes, maybe one more.
I think a pilgrim wants to be immersed in the culture of the
Yeah, immersed in the culture, definitely. Now we could expand on all this. So this is to kind of get us going here.
There's a hand up there.
Oh, a Zoom hand.
Well,
Connie? Yeah.
yeah, I was just going to say that when I arrange travel, and most of my group travel is for churches, but the name of my company was Special Journeys, because I encouraged everyone to realize that they were on a journey. They weren't just a tourist.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So yeah, just a little bit, my own sabbatical pilgrimage, this came, as I said, this past summer. And I mean, for one, it was an opportunity to just maybe take a step back and look to the past and just kind of look at where I've been and where I was at that point. I've been on the staff at Westminster since 2004. I came as a young, no gray hair yet. I do have some gray in the corners here, thanks to children, I think. But came pretty much after a year. I spent a year in Mexico after college, and then came here as a director of youth and alternative worship was my title at the time. Began the ordination process in 2007, and then joined the pastoral staff in 2014. So it was just a chance. Heading into it was a chance to be grateful for this place and for all the different ways that I've been able to grow and to learn and to explore my own sense of call and vocation, and just the amazing sense of community that Rachel and I, and now our kids as well, experience here. And I was trying to think, and I don't have an exact time frame, but even before I was on staff at a church, I've been involved in weekly worship planning at some level, whether it was in youth group or various groups that I was helping with while I was in college, but some kind of just the weekly rhythm of worship in a congregation, since 8th, 9th grade, which was just kind of just sort of interesting to think about in that way. And so here I was with this time to get out of that rhythm, for 10 weeks, which I will say was very strange, very strange indeed, but a very welcome gift. And the areas that I really wanted to focus on, areas that give me life, and to try to dive into areas like worship and music, which entailed trying to, so that entailed a couple of things. It entailed trying to just experience worship in other places, and to see what other churches are doing, try to meet and network other people that wear similar shoes that I do, and just talk to them about their own context. So have the chance to mostly Zoom with people in various locations, different churches. It involved dusting off some sheet music for guitar that I've been wanting to get into, and just it's one of those things that sadly, as I stare, longingly at that guitar, it's like, just hearing the voice like, play me, please, please, play me. And so just, especially that first week of sabbatical when we were home, just carving out time each day to spend a couple of hours practicing and revisiting some old pieces and learning some new. Also getting a chance to sing, which I'll share a little bit in a second. And also reading. I love to read. Love to dive into a book, and I'll share a little bit about some of my companions, author companions who journeyed with me this summer. And then lastly, travel, or you could even say sacred travel. I love this idea of pilgrim because it's been ingrained in me just from experiences in church communities that when we go to a place, and this comes from going on mission trips, from middle school on, it's like when we go to a place, it's a chance to learn, a chance to become more of who God's calling you to be, and to find family really in all these different places we might go. So I'm going to break up the bulk of the time into two main categories. So we'll start with the places, and then we'll go to the people. And along the way, I just will offer one sentence reflections of to be a pilgrim, just kind of going back to this series title, To Be a Pilgrim Is To. So one of my first stops was the Presbyterian Association of Musicians Worship and Music Conference. This takes place at the Montreat Conference Center down in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Has anyone been to Montreat? Yeah, great. It's funny. I've mainly lived in the Northeast, for most of my life. And as I met more and more people who had experience in the Southern Presbyterian Church, I would hear all the time about like, oh, you've been to Montreat? Have you Montreat? Like, you know Montreat? You've been to Montreat? I'm like, what is it with this Montreat? I mean, it's not that great. It's like, people, this is ridiculous. But the first time I went, I was like, I get it. This is beautiful. This is beautiful, sacred territory here. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful setting, like I said, in Black Mountain, North Carolina, and they have year-round events and sometimes weekend retreats. They also have week-long experiences, typically in the summer. At the very least, I would encourage you, just go on their website sometime. If you're in a season of life that you have freedom, availability to spend a weekend or even a week at a conference, they bring in just top-notch authors, speakers throughout the year for a whole variety of subjects. This is a conference that I've gone to for, I think this was my 5th year going, not consecutively, but and what I love about it, and this picture gives you just a little bit of a taste. There are daily worship experiences, and I should say this is put on by Presbyterian Association of Musicians, or known as PAM, is an organization within the PCUSA, largely consisting of church music directors and pastors, folks who are involved in worship in their contexts, and people come from all over. Several hundred people, and there's 2 different weeks of the conference. This year, Tim Evers and I went and experienced it together. And actually, the anthem today that the choir sang, the May the Mind of Christ, that actually was one of the repertoire pieces that we sang as part of the choir. There's daily worship with creative use of music and art. You can see just the art and what happens is throughout the week, they usually have an artist in residence that will, gradually in conversation with the theme of the week that's being preached on, the space will grow to incorporate various artwork. This is called Anderson Auditorium, and really the first time I walked in there was when I had that moment of, okay, I get it. I get why so many people continually talk about Montreat and how formative it's been in their own faith journeys. it's a very intergenerational conference. So there are things you could sign up to participate as a elementary school student, a middle, high school, on up to an adult. And then everyone comes together for worship. And then throughout the week, you get to see and to hear intergenerationally what everyone's kind of been working on, and they incorporate that into worship. And it's very, very well done. I mean, some of just the top-notch practitioners in all these different fields, from young voices to adult choirs. There are workshops on a host of topics. And some of the things I dove into this year, there was one where a young, kind of a current contemporary hymn writer was talking about just the formative power of hymns, but looking at it mainly through the lens of the texts themselves, and sort of what opens up, what kind of meaning either opens up or closes depending on the form of the hymn. And it was just a really interesting deep dive into text and how, even the concept of rhyming, he looked, and I forget the stat, but how many hymns or songs are there that rhyme the words, for example, love, and what other word do you think? Dove, that'd be one, yeah. Above, right. And he just made the point, like, when we sing that over and over, and we've chosen, okay, this is going to be a rhyming text. All right, well, we got love here. If we're locked into that, I guess we're going to say above, and how that can reinforce this idea that God is above, and just what does that theologically say, if that is the connection we make, that like, oh, God is above, God is above, and not God is dwelling within, around, even below. And so it's a very interesting deep dive. I did a very, very nerdy deep dive into the lectionary, and with David Gambrell, who's just a gift to the PCUSA, and anytime he speaks, I try to go. But for me, the thing that draws me to this conference each year is getting to sing in the adult choir. And this ends up being about 150 or so voices, most of whom are music directors, choir leaders, so good sight readers, and like I said, so we sang the piece that the choir sang today, but with one of and I'll play, the audio is okay. I wish it were a little crisper, but I forgot to get to the slide earlier. But one of the highlights was singing this within worship. It was a whole service on giving thanks, and so we sang this from Mendelssohn's Elijah. We're somewhere in here. Anyone sung the Mendelssohn's Elijah, the oratorio? And a couple of years ago we sang the one about the storm and the torment, coming, and that was very exciting. And hard to hear the text. The audio was cutting in and out. I don't know why, but thanks be to God who laveth the thirsty land. It's a lovely phrase. So that was a thrill. But musically, one of the first things that just sort of floored me is what we sang earlier. And I'm sorry, Zoom folks, you missed as we were trying to find you in the Zoom verse. At the very first service of worship on the first night, the first thing that was sung was what we opened with, this "Come, bring your burdens to God," a cappella, very little accompaniment. It's so often, at these kind of big events, and certainly what we just heard was a big boisterous conclusion to a service that was centered around Thanksgiving and gratitude. But the whole conference opened with just this call to come lay your burdens down, and it was just a lovely invitation to be still and to think about what is it that I'm carrying. And so that, I think, one thing to be a pilgrim is to be mindful about what you are carrying, because you can't carry too much or you're not going to get very far. You're going to be weighed down on the journey, and what you take has to enable the pilgrimage. You have to make decisions. Do I want water or a portable DVD player? So to be a pilgrim is, I think, to be mindful about what you are carrying and to be willing to lay aside the things that are not going to help. For me, that song, come bring your burdens to God, was just an invitation for me to come into this season of sabbatical and to lay down the things that were not going to help me dive into it fully, and to stop worrying about what's happening. Today is this day, and tomorrow we got to start thinking about, just stop. There's capable people who are doing these things. Be on sabbatical, lay it down, and so that was a great invitation for me in that week. Another place that was very significant, and I know significant to many of you in this room, is Scotland. And I first visited Scotland in 2012. Spent a week on the Isle of Iona, in a very similar experience that you'll hear from Jenny Clark whenever she does. Not next week because it's Rise Against Hunger, 22nd. So Pastor Jenny Clark will be sharing about her week on Iona that she and her husband Steve took this past summer. We actually didn't quite overlap, but she was there in Scotland about a week before us. But I was first there in 2012, and it was a time that I was still very much wrestling with my sense of call, with my sense of where God was calling me. Very much still in the ordination process, and just asking, trying to think a lot about where I saw myself. And so Scotland has always been a place for me that has coincided with just really formative times and times where I've been asking big life questions. And so whenever I guess whenever I leave, I always feel like there's a piece of my heart, a piece of my soul that just is like permanent residence in Scotland. And have made great friendships with a family of the husband, who's about my age, and he was at Iona for the week when I was in 2012, and has remained very good friends. I returned in 2014, a little bit after my ordination, on an Advent retreat that was led by John Bell, very well-known hymn writer, Church of Scotland minister, provocateur, probably could say. And so and we took a group from church in 2017 on a pilgrimage, I would say. I won't say a tour. It's always been a place that's captivated me, and I've always wanted to travel there with my family. So that was a big piece of this summer. Which leads me to my next statement. To be a pilgrim is to encounter and expect difficulty along the way. I mean, these are lovely photos. Now, and what's not photographed is just, it's a challenge to travel in our family of 5, and just the evil menaces of escalators and revolving doors and just scary airport processes and all that kind of stuff. Traveling through London Heathrow, don't know that I would do that again. We barely made our connection. We thought we had plenty of time, but it's a big airport. Yeah. So to be a pilgrim is to encounter and expect difficulty along the way, and I think kind of going back to the idea of trying to plan any kind of surprise out of our experience. That's more the mindset of a tourist, but I think in the life of faith, and if we think about pilgrimage as a way of life, we will encounter difficulty, and I think and what often seems to be the case, though it might not be the way that any of us would plan it, it's often through those difficulties that bring something new out of us, that help us to rise to the occasion in a new way. We don't always get it perfect, I will say, but we learn from these experiences, and we continue on our way. To be a pilgrim is to also graciously accept the hospitality of others. This, I think, is harder for many of us than we might think. When you're I guess when you go as a tourist somewhere, you think, I'll just pay for whatever, like I'll pay for the ride, or I'll pay for the meal, and so to be a pilgrim, I think it's a very different way. You don't rely on currency. You don't rely on currency as currency, but you rely on the currency of grace, if that's even a phrase that makes sense, right? To graciously accept the hospitality of others, and you have to learn to be okay with that. So one of the great things, one of the reasons we felt okay with going as a family of 5 is as I mentioned, our good friends who graciously said, however much you need to stay in our house, like, you're more than welcome to. We have room, which was incredible. They even ahead of time, gathered pack and plays and strollers and all the kinds of stuff that we would need, so that we didn't have to bring it all with us, which was a huge gift. Because there's just a lot of baby and young kid gear that you need. Being hosted in someone's home, when you break a plate at the very first meal you share, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. And so part of that graciously accepting the hospitality, right, is being vulnerable. And over the next several days, you're going to see the inner workings of our family at our best and at our worst, and to be okay with that. And so we're so grateful for so grateful for the hospitality of our friends. And Amy, can I share about what you did for us? Sure. Thank you. I mean, I kind of put you on the spot, so if you said no, that puts you in a weird position. But even graciously accepting the hospitality, so I'd reached out to Amy because one of the things we did not plan well was how we were going to get to the airport and back in a not really just inconvenient fashion, or just a way that we'd have to spend inordinate amounts of money to park somewhere. Yeah. So Amy, are you available to pick us up, drive us in our car to the airport, drive our car back to our house, and then pick us up in 2 weeks? And Amy, it was like, yeah, I can do that. I was like, thank you. So we were so grateful all along the way. Before we even left, we were we needed to accept the hospitality and be grateful for the gracious friendships that lighten the way along these pilgrimage journeys. I won't dwell too long on these kind of things, but just some of the highlights for us were castles and cathedrals. I mean, some people tire of them. I found out 5-year-olds tire of them. I could go to castles and cathedrals all day, all week. So this is Stirling Castle on the left, Glasgow Cathedral on the top right. And Ian, can you help me with the pronunciation of the bottom right? Is it Dunatar Castle? It's near Aberdeen. I know I probably would not get the pronunciation right, but this was a really cool one that was just out on this, outcropping. So we had fun exploring those. One of the gifts, when we talk about, I don't know, like this shallow versus deep presence. I think for us, for me, one of the ways is through connecting with nature and connecting with even the non-human guests that we encounter along the way. So we had a few just really fantastic experiences. So we were on the Isle of Mull, which is where many people stay either overnight, or at least you have to go across the Isle of Mull to get to the Isle of Iona. So we signed up for a pony excursion. And now when I think of a pony, I think of a small, 4-legged horse-like creature. And technically these were ponies, but I mean, that's a full-grown horse. My kids have never been on anything remotely that large. So we did a little pony trekking. And so Lena, our daughter, Henry, our son, and then she was riding on Bertie, and then that was Rosie. That was Henry. So we heard a lot about, I miss Rosie. And we spent a couple of days in the Cairngorm National Park. I just happened to see that region has a herd of reindeer that was brought to that area by a Swedish man. I want to say in the 1950s or 60s, and they have, so there are enclosures here and there, but they have a pretty amazing expanse to explore. He had been in that region and noticed this is a very similar climate to what reindeer would be used to. So there's over, I think, 100, maybe 150 or so reindeer, and so we were able to kind of do the short hike up to this open field and just walk among them. I mean, they're very, very docile. The hardest instruction was like, please do not pet them. Not that they're aggressive, but it just sort of messes up, the dynamics. But we did get to feed some of them, hand feed. So we held out some food, and they just came right on up with their antlers, waving around, and that was just a very, very magical experience. And then near the Isle of Iona is the island of Staffa, which is a nesting ground for puffins. And so I've been there once before and I didn't see any, but actually Jenny Clark had been there the week before and sent a picture saying like they're here, like waiting for you. And I mean that photo is not zoomed. I mean, we were about as far as I am from the front row of just, there's a line because there is a very sheer drop into the ocean. But yeah, just right up, and they're like little cartoon characters. I mean, just so just fascinating and cute. And they would fly off and then come back and bring food into the nest. And so we did have a limited time there because we had to get back on the boat to get back to land. But just really just to see the those kinds of experiences of the deep presence to connect with nature, connect with the animals of a place, always very, very meaningful. One of my favorite aspects of our trip, which had been one of my biggest anxieties of the trip, was driving. But I ended up, and we had, the only vehicle we could find that would accommodate 3 car seats was essentially like a small touring van. That you would say, if you were like a group of 9 people, you would probably have the same kind of vehicle.
Sprinter?
What was it? I forget what it was. I think it was a Mercedes.
Mercedes as a Sprinter.
And so kind of going to, someone had said earlier to be a pilgrim is to be aware of local customs and practices. One of my favorites, which I think people got tired of hearing me talk about, how this is really like illustrative for like how we could just be with one another in general. On the Isle of Mull, there is most of the time it's only wide enough for one vehicle, but it's a two-way road. It's a two-way road that would have, you know, maybe a truck or a small car, a huge bus.
Yeah.
So what they have, and I was trying to look to see if I could capture this. So a part of, to me, to be a pilgrim, for those of you in the room, it's underneath the Zoom dialogue. To be a pilgrim is to adapt to local practices. And so this, you know, so part of it is, all right, I need to drive in a different way. What it has are these things called passing places. Yeah. And I just love thinking about a passing place as a metaphor for just being in a relationship. But what it is, there would be these occasional widenings of the road, either on the right or the left. And, you know, so, you know, since we drive there, you know, we're driving on the left side of the road. How to think about that? Drive on the left side. If the passing place is on my side and there's a car coming, I move over and then I wait. And I wait for that car to go by and then I resume. If there's a passing place on the other side, it ends, you know, and often what happens, depending on the timing, is it just becomes this kind of like give and take, and or not yet chicken. Maybe, but we try to avoid that situation. But it became this sort of like, I am aware of you. I'm going to give you the space so that you can get over, so that I can get, you know. And then it's just this give and take relationship that happens. You know, and I don't think I had one that quite captured, but so you see the car, I'm following our friends. Now they're waiting because I think someone was coming, and it was, yeah, it was really, really fun. Really quite fun.
You ever have to wait for 6 or 7 vehicles to go by while you're sitting in the back?
I mean, never, I mean, not really. I mean, there was not a ton of traffic. Yeah, I mean, I would say never more than like 2 or 3 at the most.
It's the big buses that stick out even if they're in the late line.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was a little daunting the first time that
and you
a
kind
bus.
of feel like you should be going to the right because that's where
Yes,
we live.
yeah, right.
You have
So
to-
our friends are very, they gave us like like before we got to the island, you know, it was like, hey, here's what's gonna happen. You know, just remember, like, you don't go to the right one. Like, you
John,
yes,
did you go to the Isle of Skye?
we did not.
Okay, so this is my Isle of Skye. They have the same thing in the Isle of Skye, but there are hills, like
Yeah, well,
hills,
Yeah.
and we were in one of the small tour buses, and they told us, you know, yeah, we're gonna pull over. Well, guess what? When we pulled over, here comes a herd of sheep, like trundling down this hill. It seemed to me like there were hundreds of. I'm probably exaggerating, but like so we had to wait for all these sheep.
Oh, yeah.
You're shaking your head. Did you see?
Yeah.
And the sheep
Yeah.
went past. And then we're like, how does this happen? And then we went up and we couldn't see what was on the other side of the hill because it was so steep.
Yep.
It was amazing. Anyway.
I think to be a pilgrim is to be mindful of others on the journey. I think in a different way. You know, as a tourist, I mean, you might be with a group, but let's say if you're just touring, you know, with let's say you know, spouse or friends, you're not super aware or concerned about like what everyone else at the resort's doing, right? I think to be a pilgrim is to be aware of like who else is on this journey and how can we, you know, help each other, how can we bless each other, what do they have to offer, what can I receive from them as a gift, what can I give them as a gift. So this is just a fun little thing that Jenny Clark did. She had texted me, I guess when they were leaving the Isle of Iona after their week, and she said that she had left a little stone with our kids' names on it under a bench right out front of the Abbey. So those are these 3 smaller stones here. And then so we were with our friends who also have a 6-year-old. And so we told our friends, like, you know, just FYI, like, you might want to write your kid's name on a stone. Bring it with you so that he doesn't feel left out. I didn't give him the size though, because this stone was way bigger than. So on the day that we went to the Abbey and we went around and then I was like, go look in this little area, see if you see anything under the benches, and so they're going, and it was just a lovely. They were like, you could just see wires like buzzing and like not connecting. Like what? How? Actually, the funniest, they were like, how did Pastor Jenny know about Logan? How does she know Logan? Like, I don't know. This was the picture on the top right. This for me was one of my favorite just little snapshots. The man that you can't really see, his name is Tom Gordon. I imagine Jenny will talk more about him because he was one of the leaders of the week that they were there. But we got to the Abbey in time to attend a short midday service. So it was about 10 minutes long with a short liturgy, and we sang, and he was leading it. And then afterwards, he came up and started talking to our older two kids, and just one of the greatest gifts I think you can give parents is to treasure their kids, in this way. And this was a complete stranger we'd never met, but his receiving of them was just so beautiful. I'm like standing back, just like weeping, taking this picture, but because he was like, "Do you want to know a secret about the Abbey?" And they were like, of course we do. And so he took them over to this spot, and they're kind of looking at where in the wall, in the stone of the Abbey, you see. Now, Iona experts help me. There's a cat and a monkey. Is that right? And carved into the stone to kind of represent these different aspects of the monastic life. It's kind of stately and austere, but it's also very playful and mysterious. And so he was showing them, it was such a lovely gesture and welcoming of them that as I'm constantly aware of not wanting to sometimes bring our chaos into places, and there's an invitation to just get out of the way, and let them experience the hospitality and the kindness of a stranger who is talking to them at their level and kind of opening up that sense of wonder. And then the last picture is the tallest point on the Isle of Iona. It's called Dunny. And so that was it looks like it was a beautiful day. On the way down, it got completely gray and started raining. And so we made it just in the nick of time. But that's a spot. I've been on the Isle of Iona. That was my third time. I always try to get to the top of that, always try to hike it. And so this was the first time that we all did it. I don't have a picture here, but one of our last experiences was getting to worship in a local church, our friends' Church of Scotland congregation, a small church in the city of Glasgow. And would you know it? It was a communion Sunday, and so throughout the service, and someday I might contrast this experience of communion within worship was so different than a couple of other experiences I had later in the summer at some local churches in the area. Excuse me. But it was a small congregation, maybe about 40 to 50 people. But it made me appreciate, I guess, the idea that when you walk into a church, now this is I don't have the experience very often of being a visitor in a church, but right off the bat, you just get a sense of, are they mindful of us? Like, are they mindful that we're here, that we're new? Is the church mindful that there might be visitors? And I think it's just that experience is really beneficial to just be in that mindset. And right off the bat, I felt like we were walking into just the way the space was set up, that the table was so prominent with the elements for communion, folks just coming up, more of a casual kind of church. But then, as we were receiving communion, we were singing, which, you know what? Come bring your burdens to God. And so I was like, what? Like this song keeps showing up for me. And just a lovely experience of being in that community, in our friend's church. It was just that was the Sunday, and then we left on Tuesday morning. But all that, I think, you know, connecting to this idea of being mindful of others on the journey. Another place to shift gears entirely, Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And I mean, Rachel and I have always loved visiting national parks. Have loved to hike. It's, you know, our hiking and visiting has been somewhat curtailed by you know, the age of our children, but this was a great opportunity, and we went with her family, rented an Airbnb and did a lot of hiking out in nature, to, again, I think just have that, try to foster and find those ways of connecting deeply with place, and not just having a shallow presence, but to try to understand, try to just bask in the beauty of a place, and to not feel like you have to move on to the next thing, and not just consume things and move on, but to absorb, as someone said earlier. So there's a lot of views like this, a lot of hiking and sitting around the fire at night. You know, kids doing the Junior Ranger program, which was really fun, seeing them get sworn in as Junior Rangers. I call this is our youngest, Micah, who is just at a delightful age this whole sabbatical. So that was one enormous gift, was just to be around him. I call him my little hiking R2D2. But the one story I'll share of this, and I didn't quite make it into my sermon on the 24th, but I'll just throw up again. This is a quote I used in the sermon, that wilderness can be at once a place of refuge and a space of disquietude. It can be where you both sigh in relief and feel your heart pounding nearly out of your chest as you approach the unknown. And I think part of it, to be a pilgrim, is to respect wildness, and to understand that, like, I'm in a place where you know, there's not everything is tailor-made for me, and I need to respect what's happening. Now, this picture was taken from a car, but on the hike that we did a little bit earlier, we had that moment of like, yes, wilderness, place of refuge, like beautiful, lovely waterfall we just saw. And then we got towards the end of the hike, and I sort of got to this part where the path meets another path, and I look, and it was like, it's what I've least wanted to see at all of these trips. And I don't know if it was the same bear. I see a bear, and a good distance away, but I see a bear just sort of walking, fortunately the other way. And it was just like, my heart pounding nearly out of my chest. I was like, oh my. Okay. So we just, you do what you're supposed to do. And we, just, got back to our cars, and like, took a big sigh. But yeah, to be a pilgrim is to respect wildness. And so often you see these like ridiculous videos of in a national park. It's like, let's go take a picture of the bear. Like, let's go.
Right up to him.
So moving along to the people. Talked a good bit about them, but obviously it became very clear early on, and I think the mindset that this was a sabbatical, for me, but also it really was a sabbatical for our family, and like I said, just to get to experience for 10 weeks this just lovely age of Micah, and the 5-year-olds too, but this is on a beach on the Isle of Iona that actually I'd never been to before. I'd never made it there. That's me mowing the lawn on like the middle of a Tuesday. And Henry, who still, I don't know how much longer this will last, but has to get his own mower and his earmuffs, which are his headphones, to mirror.
That's cool.
And then Lena and I on a boat in Scotland, one of the many boats we took. So they were my companions. The other two companions I will highlight are one is Parker Palmer. Anyone read anything by Parker Palmer? He if you have not, I could not more highly recommend the book Let Your Life Speak. This was an incredibly formative book for me in that same kind of time frame, pondering ordination or not. What is it God's calling me to do? Actually, Pastor Gary Artisoni gave me a copy of that book, and I've reread it probably 5 times. But the book I read on sabbatical by him is called A Hidden Wholeness, Welcoming the Soul and Weaving Community in a Wounded World. And the other subtitle of that is The Journey Toward an Undivided Life. And how it connects for me is the idea, he talks a lot about the inner life and the outer life. And I think that connects really well with the idea of the geographical pilgrimage versus the inner pilgrimage, the quote that we began with. Parker Palmer just writes so compellingly about weaving together, allowing our inner life to inform and to be shaped by what happens in the outer life. He calls it role versus soul, like our kind of public role and the way that people see us maybe publicly and what happens at the soul level, that there wouldn't be a disconnect between them. His writing is, I think, could, in my mind, could be summarized as an invitation to live as authentic selves. He quotes the poet Rumi, "If you are here unfaithfully with us, you're causing terrible damage." That's such a powerful quote, one that I think just evokes when we see leadership train wrecks, around us. A lot of it's like someone was trying to be present in a community unfaithfully, whether, deceiving, just keeping their inner life, trying to sort of maintain this completely different life kind of things. He is Quaker by background. One of the illustrations he uses in his book, and it's kind of funny, he says, we're Quakers, we don't really rely on technology, so this is our Quaker PowerPoint. He says, take a strip of paper. And so he talks about this 4 stages of our onstage life, so kind of the life that people see versus the backstage life. The first stage is like infancy. There's no separation, right? So what you see from an infant is what you get. Metaphorically, literally, the whole shebang. Second phase is adolescence into adulthood. And he talks about the fact that we all are born with what he calls birthright gifts, the gifts of who we are and our authentic selves. But by virtue of just life and difficulties and various circumstances, almost all of us will put up a wall between, so kind of one side of this is our onstage life versus our backstage life, or our role, soul, inner, outer. Put up a wall. Now, at some point, what will happen is maybe we'll try to reach for integration, and we'll want our inner life to inform our outer life, and so we'll kind of try to make it more integrative, and we want to be centered. He uses that language of centering, but he says, so what we have now is a circle, right? And says now what actually happens is this is just as much as a wall as that straight line was. What happens is we can be so centered, and it's almost like a corral that we then use to maybe exclude folks or anything that's different or unfamiliar to us, we want to keep out. So what he talks about is this idea of if I can actually do it, a Mobius strip. So if you twist one end slightly, I don't know if this would be very hard to see, but if I start tracing the outside, all of a sudden now I'm on the inside. And you can do this at home with a strip of paper if you want. But I just thought it was just funny. Like, this is the Quaker PowerPoint. But what he ends up talking about is the idea that we're constantly in an exchange between what's in here and what's out there, and whatever is inside us continually flows outward to help form or deform the world. And really the reality is that the wall is an illusion. I mean, we think we can keep separation between, you know, our inner selves and kind of the outer world, but really all of us are either walking that Mobius strip awake, or we are sleepwalking through it. And so I think one of the things that I think Parker Palmer does is to remind us that to be a pilgrim is to treat relationships with reverence. Another quote I love that he brings from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke is, "The love that consists is this, that two solitudes protect and border and salute each other." I just love the inherent respect and almost reverence that encourages us to see when we encounter another person, that my solitude is encountering your solitude as they protect, border, and salute each other. The other pilgrim I'll mention, as I'm mindful of time, is Eugene Peterson. You might know Eugene Peterson for his translation of The Message. So he did a very modern, contemporary translation of the Bible called The Message. But he wrote a lot of books. And one of the series I'd wanted to get through was his pastoral series, and there's 4 books, 5 Smooth Stones for Pastoral Work, Working the Angles. So these are the 4, and if you're welcome to look at these if you want at the end. Under the Predictable Plant, and the Contemplative Pastor. The 5 Smooth Stones for Pastoral Work, he breaks it into, and what I love about it is because he talks about the role of a pastor in such a rich, multifaceted way, and just a really compelling, when there's a lot of, frankly, I think, cynicism out there. I mean, you read a lot of headlines about, the pastors leaving ministry to pursue, careers elsewhere. I really find compelling his portrayal of the pastoral vocation. But he talks about these 5 smooth stones of prayer directing, story making, naysaying, and community building. And under the predictable plant, he uses the narrative of Jonah to explore the spiritual dimensions of the pastor. And just some things I feel like he highlights. I think they were, unintentionally, but it ended up they were very compatible companions in the way, because I think Eugene Peterson in his writings takes Palmer's call to authenticity and living an undivided life, and he takes that and looks at it and explores it specifically within a pastoral context. I love the way that he talks about, just regular old ordinary church life and church folk, but kind of infusing them with just the reality that it's holy ground that we walk on, that when we encounter another person in the life of the church, we're not just encountering an ordinary person, that everybody has this gift, the image of God in them. And I love the respect and the reverence that he shows in writing about his own ministry. And he talks a lot about the previousness of God. It was a phrase that has stuck with me. A few weeks back, I think on Labor Day weekend, I shared a portion of one of these books where he talks about the cycle of a day, and that in the Hebrew scriptures, the day actually begins at night. And so he has this whole little section that I find so beautiful, that, we go to sleep and we get out of the way, and God begins God's work, and we wake up to a world in which God's already been active and moving, and we wake up and we join that work, the previousness of God. And he talks about that even our prayer is answering speech. God has spoken, and we respond. He paints this picture as a pastor, as a servant. There's a whole host of maybe models that are out there, pastor as a program director, as a CEO, as a, this or that, but fundamentally the pastor is a servant. So I just love the picture that he paints of ministry. So these are all the ones that I've added along the way. To be a pilgrim is to be mindful of what you're carrying, to expect difficulty along the way, to graciously accept the hospitality of others, to adapt to local practices, to be mindful of others on the journey, to respect wildness, and to treat relationships with reverence. I've been obviously been back since August, and this is really the first forum that I've had a chance to talk about it. But for me, this was very much an inner journey and an outer journey. As we traveled around, it was concurrently exploring, my own inner life and my own call, and just doing the things that give me life. I returned refreshed and ready to re-enter the life of the congregation. It was very strange to just be in the pews, as it were, and to not get to lead. So I'm going to close with one thing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, stop mirroring. I'm still sharing. Oh, I'll just leave it up. Just do that. Okay. So we'll end with one piece that you will definitely know, that I had heard kind of in the months before. I'd heard it on the radio, and it was just a lovely guitar arrangement of a beloved song, probably for many of us. And it's like, that's one of the first things I want to dive into. These are newer strings which take so long to settle in with this. Okay.
That's great.
Thanks, John.
That was an arrangement of Somewhere Over the Rainbow by, sorry, I should have had this, so Toru Takamitsu. I heard it on WRTI, some mornings, like,
Beautiful.
and then there's a whole, there's already haven't like there's an arrangement of his stuff on Amazon that I promptly picked up.
How long did it take you to perfect that? That's a hard song. That's a hard song. I mean, you didn't make a mistake.
I appreciate you, Rick. I mean, I worked on it the first week that I was on sabbatical. Yeah, I don't know, it's hard to quantify. I mean, I try to in many ways, learning a piece of music is a pilgrimage. I mean, you get in there and it's just completely unfamiliar terrain. You're like, oh, that muscle hurts.
Wow.
This isn't working quite like I expected. But yeah, I mean, it's like the more you repeat, the more you just, dwell on a particular passage. And but anyway, so I want to be mindful of time. That was the finish. That was the big finish. I'm happy to stick around and talk, answer any other questions. But thank you for joining us on Zoom, and thank you to those of you in the room. Let me do thank you. One question.
Before you finish, could you put back on the screen the quote about the inner journey?
Yeah.
Thank you.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got it. Yes. Great, we'll go in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.